So have you ever thought about in your life some of those most important relationships and you kind of just ask yourself, why am I struggling so much in these relationships? What's going on? What am I doing wrong? What are they doing wrong? And we find ourselves either stressed, whether at work, whether at home, and we're just asking ourselves and we can't figure out what the heck is going on. So the harder I try, does it seem like that the harder it gets? That as you're really trying to get better at being a human being, you seem to maybe go backwards sometimes? Well, I will tell you one of the reasons is that I don't think that we really are aware of how we're showing up a lot of the times. A lot of times I think the struggles that we're having with other human beings is the fact that we're struggling with them as a human being and we're not recognizing that we actually have some issues that we need to address. We're going to have a discussion around how I can increase our emotional maturity. And to do that, we're going to introduce you to a model. And as we go through this model, I want you to be able to think about, where do you play most of the time? What side of this model are you on most of the time? And what you'll find is that as you begin to identify that, you'll begin to realize that maybe you have some of the responsibility in these relationships. To illustrate this, let me just share with you a story that plays out. I've been doing a lot of trainings over the years, almost 20 years, probably hundreds of trainings, but we have this one experience in this training that I think really illustrates this the best that I can. We start off with a certain temperament. We call it the green temperament. And in that temperament, they're really more about being competent and being, really in control of their lives. And then they're married to somebody that might have this, what we call the blue temperament, the really relationship, the touchy-feely person. And so it kind of plays out like this. Here's what low maturity looks like. The husband says to wife on the day we're married, hey, sweetheart, guess what? I want you to know that I love you. And if I ever change my mind, I'll let you know. Now, the blue wife sitting there going, well, wait a second. I need to be told I'm loved like 10, 15 times a day for him to know that he really loves me. And so right there, we have this dichotomy happening, or this conflict that's happening is, I have one person that wants to be told they're loved all day long, and another person that says, I'll tell you when I loved you when I married you, and you're just gonna have to deal with the rest of it. Now, how does this play out in real life? It goes something like this. The wife's at home, she's thinking about, or husband, right? It's not gender related, but the spouse is at home and they're just thinking about how much they love their spouse and how much they're excited to be with them. And so they want to call them at work and they want to see how their day's going at work. And so they call their husband or wife at work and say, ring, ring, the phone rings, and they pick up on the other end, and the green husband or wife on the other end goes, hello. The spouse says, oh, hi, honey, how are you? I just wanted to see how your day's going. And they go, fine. Well, I just was thinking about, maybe what we could do this weekend. And he would say, or she would say, well, I'm busy right now. Oh, you're working at work. Well, yeah, you called me at work. Oh, well, I'm sorry. How about we talk about this later tonight? That would be great. Okay, fine. Well, I love you. Okay, goodbye. And right there in that moment, both humans were sitting there having this experience with somebody they really cared about, and both were operating from a very low mature behavior, because one is sitting there saying, hey, I'm at work being competent. I don't have time for this stuff. The other one's sitting at home saying, I'm in love and I want to talk and I want to engage with my husband, and he doesn't want to talk to me. In fact, the thought goes through the husband or wife at home, like, wait a second, I think I upset him at work. Maybe I should call him back and apologize. And right then and there, it all starts over again, right? They call, the husband picks up or wife picks up the phone, and it all starts over again. So I can tell you, in neither one of their experiences are they trying to hurt the other person. But in reality, they both are, because they're operating from a low maturity perspective. And their behaviors that they're exhibiting are low mature behaviors. So now we're going to talk about this idea of maturity, and at the end, we'll take this same story and talk about how could it play out from a maturity perspective. So the question I'd have you think about right now as I get into this next part of this presentation is that let's ask ourselves this question. Which wall are you facing? Now that'll have meaning to you in a minute, but as we go through and explain this, I want you to begin to start asking yourself the question, as I understand this model a little bit better, I wonder which wall I really am facing. and which wall is having the biggest impact on my relationships. As I introduce you to this model, I want you to understand that there's two things that are happening, actually three things that are happening. First off, there's a wall over here. So imagine a wall, whatever room you're sitting in, kind of reach over and say, okay, there's a wall on this side, and there's a wall on this side. And these walls are connected by a continuum. Now the wall on this side, if you're drawing this out, write the words low maturity. The walls on this side is high maturity. And they're connected by this continuum. Now what's important to know about this is that as you now know that these walls exist, know that there's this continuum, every one of us is on this continuum. You don't get to choose to be not on the continuum. And then the second thing is that whichever way you're facing is where you're moving towards. You don't get to be neutral. You're either facing the low mature wall or you're facing the high mature wall. There's no neutral in this. So as we're going through our lives, all of us are facing one or the other walls. Now let's talk about what they are and what makes up these walls so that you can start determining which wall are you facing most of the time. So as we describe the low mature wall over here, let me give you a few words to help you to understand it. Low maturity is about me and it's about my self-interest. So what happens when I'm looking at this wall? I'm most interested in everything about me. Whereas the high mature wall, the couple words that I associate the high mature wall, it's about others and it's about humility. So think about this. This is about me, and or another word we could use is pride, or it's about others and it's about humility. So now what does that look like? How does that play out? Well, when you're facing one of these walls, there are specific behaviors that you exhibit. So some of the things to think about now as I'm facing these walls. If you're facing this wall over here, the low mature wall, one of the things I want you to envision now is a mirror on that wall. Now, why is that important? In both of these instances, what you need to realize is behind each of these walls are humans. People that you're trying to work with, people you're trying to live with, people you're trying to get through life with, but there are humans on the other sides of these walls. We don't get to go through life existing as an independent, not in relationships. So as I'm facing this wall over here and I see this mirror, what do you think you notice when you're looking at the wall? So here I am, Dave. I'm facing the low mature wall. What do you think I'm seeing? Well, the reality is if I'm looking into a mirror, I'm seeing me. And now as I'm interacting with the other humans that are on the other side of that wall, all of those interactions are directly tied to how it's impacting me. And in fact, now they actually become objects, not humans to me, because their whole purpose is to help me accomplish what I'm trying to accomplish. So now if I'm facing the high mature wall, I want you to imagine a window. And this is what's really important. This is probably the most important part of this whole model, is that as I'm now facing the high mature wall, I now see you on the other side of the wall through this window. And there's some key components to this. I love the idea, this concept that says, I see you, right? And not only do I see you as a human that's equal to me. You're not somebody that's upper, less or more, or any of those kind of things. I just see you as a human that's equal to me. And we now are trying to accomplish something. We are now trying to go somewhere. So this is my human aspect. High maturity is I see humans and I see people equal to me. There's not a lot of conflict going on here because I'm most interested in where we are trying to go. What's happening over here, though, is I'm most interested in what? I'm most interested in where I'm trying to go. And you now become an object that's either in my way or an object that I can use to help me get to where I need to get to. So now let's talk about some of the common principles associated with this, because I think it's important. And now you know the answer to this question, right? Which wall are we facing? We're either facing the low mature wall or we're facing the high mature wall. But some things to be able to know and understand about what's happening here now. First is that we're all facing one or the other walls, right? That's the first principle. The second principle is whichever wall you're facing, that's where you're moving towards. I learned this principle a while ago. My 7-year-old grandson, he wanted to learn how to surf. And so for his birthday, I got him surfing lessons in Honolulu. He's pretty excited about this. We go down to Honolulu, we find this old guy. He had to have been like 80 some odd. I was so excited that I got this real good old surfer guy that's going to teach my grandson how to surf. He does a few things on the shore and then they get out in the ocean and I go out with them. And of course, as they do in Honolulu, because they want to make sure that they make some money, the photographer went out with them. And so I'm watching my grandson and boy, he paddles and he gets up on the board the very first time and he rides it all the way in. And if you've ever been to Honolulu or Waikiki, there's lots of people in the ocean that are learning how to surf at this one place. And somehow my grandson surfed all the way in around people and I don't know how he didn't run over anybody. And then the photographer said, you know, your grandson listens really well. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, one of the rules of surfing is you look to the spaces, not the faces. And then he went on to explain, he says, you know, as a photographer out here, I can't tell you how many times I get run over. Because as I'm sitting there taking pictures, people are sitting there staring right at me, and they come and they just run right over the top of me. Because wherever you look, that's where the board actually goes. So as you're surfing down and all those people, if you're looking where the spaces are, your board actually moves and doesn't go through people. And that's what, so he's sharing it. Well, that story meant a lot to me as it pertains to this model, is wherever you're looking, that's where you're moving towards. So that's the second thing that you need to understand. And the third thing that you need to understand is by default, meaning that as a human being, by default, the wall of default is the low mature wall. In other words, if you're not even aware that these walls existed before today, the chances are you're going through life doing a lot of low mature kinds of behavior because that's the wall of default. The only way you can actually face the high mature wall is to deliberately know and turn and face the high mature wall. It doesn't happen just by chance. So wall of default is low mature. Wall of maturity is the wall that takes deliberate action and takes work and takes effort. So now the question you ask yourself is that, so where do I spend most of my time? And now we can go back as we started this. Do you ever find yourself stressed in relationships, having problems in relationships, and you think that they're the problem? Well, I can tell you that if you understand this idea of maturity, probably a lot of your problems that you're running into, and understanding this idea of emotional maturity now makes sense, right? If I'm facing the low mature wall, then, and you know what this feels like. Have you ever been in a relationship where you felt like, man, I don't feel like I'm really a human to this person. I feel like I'm just an object to them. You know what that feels like. But yet, for some reason, we think that we're so good at this that we don't do that to other people. But that is true, that as other people interact with you, and if you're facing the low mature wall, they're feeling like objects. Now that we know that, now that's your challenge. That's my challenge. Because now that we're self-aware that these walls exist, I have a choice to face the high mature wall, or by default, I'll just face the low mature wall. The choice is now yours, and what choice will you make? We have so many stories to share with you. So subscribe below so you can learn more about some of our other stories, but let me get back to the story we started with today. So now let's take that same story and let me rephrase it in a high mature experience. So here's this couple. We already know the backstory on it. It's in the middle of the day, and the wife says, I want to call, I want to check in, and she chooses not to, or he chooses not to. And all day long, boy, it's just so hard not to pick up that phone and want to connect. And then at the end of the day, the spouse walks through the front door, and the husband or wife that was at home says, you know, I just want you to know that I love you so much that I didn't call you today, because I know that that would have interrupted what you were doing at work and your competence of what you're trying to be at work. And so I intentionally chose not to call you today. I just wanted you to know that. Now, it's not all that responsibility of that human. What would happen if this? What would happen if he at work or she at work knew that the spouse at home needs to connect? What would happen if all of a sudden they decided at 11 o'clock in the morning when they had 5 minutes just to pick up the phone and make a phone call? And as they made that phone call, they could say, because they knew what was important to their spouse or partner, they said, I just want you to know I had a few extra minutes and I wanted to call you and tell you how much I love and appreciate you. I'm not doing it because I need to do that. But I know how important it is to you, so I just want you to know, I want to let you know that this morning, and hope you have a great day. Click. So what we find is that either one could start to choose to be mature. That's critical in this. But the second part of this is that you don't do it in a vacuum. As you are trying to grow in maturity, make sure that the people that you're working with also know that you are really trying to help build that relationship. It builds trust, it builds confidence. Don't do things like behind the scenes. Tell them, I didn't call you today because I love and care about you so much and I know what's really important to you. And eventually over time, what ends up happening is, because we're all human, as we begin to be validated, we then immediately want to turn around and start validating others. And so the dynamics completely change the entire relationship. So it only takes one person to begin the change. Is that person going to be you, or are you going to wait around for someone else? So what we'd like to do now is invite you to begin your journey through a self-awareness experience of clicking down below and taking your free 4 lenses assessment and begin your journey of gaining more emotional maturity. And then you get to join us on our journey of helping us put the human back into humanity.